Thank you so much, Joel. Welcome back, everyone. With no further ado, I give you Chris R. to speak on step one. Chris, the floor is yours for about the next 40 minutes.
There you go. Thank you so much. My name again is Chris R., and I am from Ingram, Texas, grateful recovered alcoholic, and delighted to be here. Looking back over when Billy was talking and flipping back over the pages, which I want to do, checking everybody out. And I'm not kidding, guys. There's some folks in this gathering that I've known forever, and it's so good to see you guys. I don't know. I was looking on there. I couldn't figure out a way to put my email on that little chat, so there may not be a way, but maybe Carrie and they can post it tomorrow, and so we can stay in touch with some of you that you want to. If you have any questions that I don't get answered or whatever, but I sure appreciate being asked to do this. One of my favorite topics, we bookend this thing. I've got a couple of favorite steps in there, but first step stuff is the thing that kind of started my journey for me, kind of set me on the path. As I was talking about earlier, I was sitting in lots of meetings, guys, with the nicest people on earth, but I called myself an alcoholic, but I didn't really believe I was an alcoholic because I've never robbed a liquor store or gone to prison or done any of this other crazy stuff. And exactly what Bill was talking about, the qualifying piece. The truth of the matter is, guys, and I'm just going to say it, not trying to be controversial, Alcoholics Anonymous is full of people that are not alcoholics. Every time you turn around, it's just, and everybody is a little bit different. So my heart goes out to the little knucklehead that absolutely wants to get sober, is the real McCoy, and can't get sober doing what so many people are asking him to do. We're not going to bicker back and forth, guys, because I promise you I'm not going to do that. I don't want to spend all of our time doing it, but said something earlier. I don't want anybody to get the takeaway from anything I'm saying that I'm knocking meetings. I'm a meeting-making fool, folks. I love meetings, especially now with the Zooms. I appreciate it. What I object to is 90 and 90. What I object to is a bumper sticker that sets people up for failure. Okay, there's a lot of people, folks, that I talk to on a regular basis that want to come in, but they can't. They got kids, they got jobs, they can't go to a meeting every day. And all I can say is, guys, go to as many meetings as you can go to, because that's where we're going to find our peeps. That's where we're going to go find our deals. Anything that makes us look cultish, I don't want anything to do with. I'm just done with it, But I couldn't stay sober, and I'm going to a bunch of meetings. Okay, so I'm just saying. Finally, in 87, those old guys got around me, and they opened a big book, and they started qualifying me. Now, I'm going to talk about the symptoms, and I'm watching even with one eye. I can see my little clock right here, so I'm not going to go over. I'm paying attention, guys. But one of the things that we all have to look at, we've got 467 people in this room right now, and I can't tell by looking at any of you where you are in the progression of your illness. Alcoholism is a progressive illness. And I've known some old geezers at 70 years old that drank successfully for 40 of those, 50 of those years. And it was only towards the end of their life that things came undone. And one of the worst alcoholics I ever knew was a 19-year-old kid, a young man, 19 years old. He drunk twice, blacked out both times, and got arrested. It was just, this kid was not even fair at all. This kid got no social drinking at all. He came out of the chute just a nasty drunk. And I can't tell by looking around this room. We got some nice old people in here. We got some good looking young people in. I don't know, guys. I'm a student of recovery. I read everything I can get my hands on, revolve around that, guys. We know alcoholism is genetic. We also know it is absolutely progressive. So if your illness has progressed pretty far, folks, you're going to be able to see these symptoms pretty clearly. If your illness hadn't progressed very far, you may have to look a little bit to see if you've got these symptoms. But I got to tell you, folks, if you'd have known the questions to ask me, you could have diagnosed me at 18 years old with alcoholism. But the people, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous in my early 20s, nobody was, not mid-20s, nobody up there was talking about the symptoms. What we were talking about is the drama, and I just couldn't relate to doing some of the crazy stuff that you losers do. So anyway, Bill Wilson on page 17 talks about a common problem and a common solution, guys. And that's exactly what it is, guys. There's a whole bunch of us. We don't have a lot in common with some of us. You know what I'm saying? Because we're all different people. Right up until the point we start talking about the symptoms of alcoholism, and they are identical. It drives me crazy because everybody out there wants to start connecting the dots. Why I'm an alcoholic. Guys, you're an alcoholic because you were born this way. And your external circumstances has exacerbated this problem and made it worse. I'm not going to ever take a shot at anybody's drama. I can appreciate that for 100%. But guys, even people that were hurt very, very much in their life, when they see that alcohol is causing a problem, they quit. And that's one of the things that Bill Wilson talks about. I mentioned real quick, there's an old geezer in town that always talks about it. Every time he shares, he says, there's no one step more important than the other. All right. I understand that. In the 100 pages, laughing with Billy earlier, in 100 pages, give or take a few pages, however you want to cut it, guys. Okay. The steps are outlined in the first 100 pages. The rest are in some great chapters after. But the 100 pages, 60 of those pages, give or take a page, are the first step. The next 11 steps are covered in the next 40 pages. So I know that we think it's all, okay, I think Bill Wilson was pretty clear. He really wanted us to understand. And exactly what Billy was saying, unless we qualify the newcomer, our job is to give that newcomer a case of alcoholism. And don't assume, because again, I'm in the treatment business, been there for a million years, don't assume that the treatment centers are teaching that. Don't assume just because they come out of treatment that they understand what this is about. That a lot of them don't. It's just that simple. It's our responsibility. Bill Wilson, some of y'all have heard me read it a lot. I got little stickers for our club. It's a little excerpt from a letter in 1942 that Bill Wilson wrote, and it's in As Bill Sees It if you want to check it out. I think it says, our chief responsibility to the newcomer is an adequate presentation of the program. No kidding. If he does nothing or argues, we do nothing but maintain our own sobriety. If he starts to move ahead, even a little, with an open mind, we then break our necks to help in every way we can. Our chief responsibility to the newcomer is an adequate presentation of the program. Yes, adequate presentation of the program, folks. I said it earlier, not to be sarcastic, is not keep coming back. Adequate presentation of the program is to sit down and qualify that little newcomer. Little guy comes in, he's all fried pie, and he's a mess, and he asked me to sponsor him. My responsibility is sit with him, just like those old geezers did me in 1987, and qualify me. Because if you're convinced you're one of us, nothing can chase you out of Alcoholics Anonymous. You'll stay. If you got this, Bill Wilson talks on page 33, and I'm not going to take time to turn to it because I'm going to run out of time. But on page 33, he talks about this lurking notion. The lurking notion that you may be different than other people has to be smashed. One of my favorite pages in the book, though, is bottom on page 20. I've got it when I cherry pick a newcomer, we talk about it. But it talks about different kinds of drinkers. It says moderate drinkers have little trouble in giving up entirely. They have good reason for it. They can take it or leave it alone. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. Hard drinker. He may have had the habit badly enough to gradually impair himself physically and mentally. It may cause him to die a few years before his time. If a sufficient strong reason comes along, ill health, falling in love, change of an environment, warning from a doctor, if any of this becomes operative, this man or woman can stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult, troublesome, and may even need medical attention. Yeah? Next paragraph, one of my faves. But what about the real alcoholic? May start off as a moderate drinker, may or may not become a continuous hard drinker, but at some stage of their drinking career, they begin to lose all control of their consumption once they start. Yeah. Listen, guys, that's Bill Wilson's verbiage right there, real alcoholic. If you want to set an AA group on its end, any of y'all, next time you go back to your home groups, introduce yourself as a real alcoholic and watch the storm come through the doors. It's like, ooh, you think you're special. In Alcoholics Anonymous today, yes, I think come on, guys. I'm a real alcoholic. Dadgummit. But I didn't know that until these guys took time out of their dinner to sit down with me in a book and opened it and showed me what it was to be who we are. And I'll show you right here. I got this little board. I don't know if y'all can see it or not. It just kind of keeps me on track. But I was laughing with Carrie. I'm not smart enough to share screens. I apologize. I'm lucky to be able to wave. Hey, guys. Oh, anyway, we do the best we can do. One of the things I want you to look at when we're talking about this first step stuff, folks, is to look at your truth based on your experience. A lot of times we have a tendency when we're talking to a group full of little newcomers, what we want to do is we want to end up trying to scare them into recovery. But again, of course, that doesn't work. Look at the symptoms and see if you can identify with the symptoms, because it's pretty black and white. You can't. I had a lady call talking about her son the other day. She said, I think he's a little bit alcoholic. It's like being pregnant, folks. You can't be a little bit. You either is or you isn't, as far as I know. If you got the symptoms, it doesn't matter if you're 17, 14, and Billy's, it doesn't matter, or 80, it doesn't make any difference. The symptoms are identical, and that's what we need to look at. 3 places in the big book where it talks about how it works, guys. In that first paragraph, it asks us to be honest. If you have the ability to be honest, you can get this deal, guys. So I'm asking you, it's not cash register honesty Bill Wilson's talking about. The honesty he's talking about, I believe, is this inward honesty. Can you look at this and identify it? Is this true? Does this ring true for you? Walks like a duck, quacks like a duck. It's a duck. Pure and simple. And it's one of the things that I think we could do better sometimes in our fellowship is make sure that every little newcomer comes in, whether they've been in a treatment center or not, qualify them and help them find their truth. Because I got to tell you guys, it'll set you free. I was on 7 prescription medications, guys, when I tried to commit suicide in 1987. All doctor-prescribed medications. I'm not out there doctor shopping like some of you fools. I have legit psychiatric disorders. You know what, guys? What it proved to be with me was untreated alcoholism. There's a lot more going on here than just whether you're drinking or not. And that's what I just want to hit the high spots. And basically what we're trying to figure out, is alcoholism a disease or is it a behavioral problem? I mean, the American Medical Association finally in 1961 got off dead center and said, stop calling it an illness. Just said this is a disease. And they knew that. Why? When the basic research that Dr. Silkworth did in the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, this idea, his just anecdotal observations that everybody, whether they were coming from European royalty or they were drinking in Central Park, they were showing the same symptoms. Everybody calls it a disease. Everybody talks it. Yes, that's fine. But then everybody still wants to connect the dots for why we drink. My mom, until the day she died, tried to connect the dots why Myers and I became alcoholics. And my 2 sisters didn't. She wanted to blame the divorce. She wanted to blame me getting hit in the eye with a rock when I was a kid. And oh my gosh, all of that affected me. It did not cause my alcoholism. I'll throw that out there, guys. Basically, the book, there's a lot of folks out there that want to talk about a 2-part illness. Up in the front of the book, Bill Wilson talks about a 2-part illness. Dr. Silkworth, they refer to the physical craving and the mental obsession. And that's the main thing we're going to talk about. But he spends half a dozen pages, talking specifically about the spiritual malady. That's with the circle triangle. When we finally got the circle triangle, and he talked about body, mind, and spirit. Same stuff. Recovery, unity, service. They connect the dots with the whole scenario. Physical craving, guys. Dr. Silkworth, medical director at Towns Hospital for 16 years or so. But he's the guy that first started pioneering this and seeing the truth about this physical craving. Once we put alcohol in our system, again, what Billy said is so true. Lord, there's how many people start reading Bill's story and they don't read the doctor's opinion. But that's where we're going to get the lion's share. From the doctor's opinion up to page 23, we talk about the physical craving. I got this little index. I'll hold it real close and y'all can take a picture of it. How's that? No, I'm just kidding. I'll get it to you one way or another. I'll get it to you. From page 23 to 43, the next 20 pages, Bill Wilson talks about the mental obsession. And then several pages in there, again, the bedevilments on page 52. And on page 64, it talks about when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out physically and mentally. He wants us to see this. But these are the qualifying pages that he uses. If we had more time, we could read some of the stories. It's pretty fascinating stuff. This physical piece, guys, is about the craving. Craving only takes place when it's in your body, guys. Some of the other fellowships, they want to interchange of the words. Guys, if you're sitting around and you're sober, a few months and you're thinking about taking a drink, you are not physically craving alcohol. It's out of your system. You are obsessing. That's why Bill Wilson says the main problem centers in his mind rather than his body. No kidding. Detox centers do a great job taking care of the physical piece. All we got to do is get the stuff out of your system, and there's no more craving. First part we got to do. That's what they talked about in the book. We think detox is important to get the substance out of our system. Once that's done, though, guys, we still got to battle with the mental obsession piece because we don't have a pill for that. Well, enter Alcoholics Anonymous, which has been a gift. I gotta tell you. Basically, we're looking at what's our truth, again, based on our experience. When I put alcohol in my system, can I guarantee every time how much I'm going to put in my system? I'll say this and move on to the next piece. Guys, 1 billion times out there drinking early on, guys. I could drink 2 beers after work and go to bed, leave a partial 6-pack in the refrigerator. As the illness continues to progress, it becomes less likely that I can do that. I'll buy a 6-pack, I'll drink it, and then 5 minutes before the store closes, I'm running back across the street so I can get another because I'm not finished yet. Guys, on certain days, the craving can be satisfied with smaller quantities of alcohol. I say this because a lot of the young people that listen to this get to a place where they believe that every time you drink, you got to black out to qualify to be one of us. That's not what the book is saying. It never says that. It says at certain times, we don't have the power to control how much we put in our system. And sometimes we can. Does that make sense, guys? I was an executive chef, guys, a long time. I was high in my career for long periods of time. I couldn't do that if I was blacking out every time I drank. Yeah, in the progression, and I don't know how long it's going to take for that thing to progress to get to that spot. That mental obsession piece, again, from 23 to 43 is the piece that changed my life that night. Those guys cherry-picked it, and they showed me some pages that they wanted me to look at. And I'm going to ask you to turn to one page real quick on page 24 if you've got your books. The fact is, now up to page 23, they've been talking about what happens when I put the stuff in my system. Now, on the top of page 24, it says, the fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. It's all alcoholics. Bill Wilson is trying to be very diplomatic here. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory and suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink. Well, of course I've got to defend. I mean, I got a choice whether I'm going to drink, don't I? No, you don't. In the next pages, there's 5 stories in here, guys. 4 of them are true stories based on true people. And the history buffs in here, I can get you the names. But the fictitious story is the jaywalker, although I'm sitting in a room with dang near 500 jaywalkers. But that's fictitious, guys. But the other stories were based on true stories. And, guys, I got to tell you, it's pretty good. If you'll read the stories, you'll see that each one of these stories is written about a high-bottom drunk. Bill Wilson doesn't talk about people living in cardboard boxes on the street. He's talking about businessmen and women out there, high bottom, that have not lost everything, who had every reason to stop and were unable to. Jim, the car salesman, one of my favorite stories. I mean, he does, aside from the fact that he's an adult that still drinks milk. Oh my God, just no wonder he's an alcoholic. I don't know. I can't just hate it. Yeah, but what did he do? Suddenly the thought crosses his mind that he could put an ounce of whiskey in the milk. Only, come on, guys, we've fallen for stupider stuff than that. You know, I've done some, I was going to quit drinking beer, and I was just going to drink natural wine. Problem is, I had a key to a wine warehouse. It did not work very well for me. You know, it ended poorly, to say the least. My all-time favorite story is Fred the businessman. Yeah. One of the best lines in the book, guys, y'all can get it. God, one of my all-time favorites. He talks about it was the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon. Now, remember that story? How many of us have done that? Yeah. Listen, guys, you go to treatment and they all want to talk about, well, what caused you to drink? Well, the girl broke up with me, or I lost a job, or all this kind of stuff. Guys, but what are you going to do? It's like if you look at this, the obsession is what the choice is. When that obsession comes back, the next paragraph, he gets squashed. The thought crosses his mind. He can have a couple of cocktails, and he ends up getting drunk. How many times have I done that? But everybody still, I'm not taking a shot at anybody, but so many people out there that don't understand this mental obsession continue to want to connect the dots of why we do that. What caused you to relapse? Oh, let me guess. Let me get. You didn't finish working the steps and be of service to other people. Is that it? That's not what they want to hear. They want to hear it was some girl. It was some guy. It was something that happened. Yeah, it just... Listen, guys, we're sitting in treatment right now. We're getting them coming in the door. Well, I relapsed because Trump lost. Well, that's not true. It's not true. You didn't work the steps, guys. You didn't do what we were supposed to do. And then the miracle takes place. Anyway, the mental obsession, guys, is pretty phenomenal. It's still one of the hardest things for people to get their little mind around. Everybody I talk to out there, I get to speak in, sheriff's associations, doctors, impaired lawyer groups, lots of organizations. I get a chance because I've been around a while to do these talks. They all understand the physical. Oprah Winfrey, Dr. Phil, they all understand this physical piece. It's just, yeah. Boy, you little alcoholics, once you start to drink, God damn, you can't quit. Yeah. So why can't you not put the first one in your system? Why does your head continue to tell you, rationalize and justify? And Bill Wilson clears it up. He just said it's plain insanity. Stop trying to paint a picture that this is some kind of behavioral problem, folks. This is an illness. You will alone, by yourself, in your own head, rationalize and justify why it's okay for you to put it in your system. We're getting a lot of people come back into treatment right now who had double-digit sobriety, who refuse to get on Zooms because you can't bond. Of course you can, but they won't do it for whatever reason and have relapsed. Because we can't pull ourselves away from this human connection. Same stuff. They walk back in. Well, I just chose to drink. It just freaks me out how many people in Alcoholics Anonymous still believe. Guys, I have lost the power of choice in drink. I still have thousands of choices. My little skinny butt got up this morning early, and I do my little prayer and meditation sitting right here at this desk every morning. And I've been doing it for a long time. And that's what we do. And I just got on break, went over there, and I called a little sponsee of mine because he was upset earlier, and I'm checking on him. I do all the things I need to do. I'm going to stay on that spiritual path. If I decide not to, because I'm too cool, I don't need to do that, too busy, all bets are off, guys. At a certain point, and because the illness doesn't stop progressing when you quit drinking, you'll be in hot water before you know it. So Bill Wilson means it about the daily reprieve. I'm with that. Let's stay active, and then we can stay sober. This other little piece, guys, I got to mention. It's a piece that some folks just flat don't want to talk about. It's that third piece that we're talking about, the spiritual malady. Great article. There's an article written by a little guy up in New Jersey, and it's called The Missing Piece, the spiritual malady. And Bill Wilson writes about it. He wrote a bunch of other subsequent articles about it, and yet nobody really wants to get in there and spend much time talking about it. The malady, what happens, guys, is you get detoxed, whatever, get the stuff out of your system. If you don't start working the program, what's going to end up happening is, my MO is about 2 weeks. About 2 weeks out, this internal discomfort starts to kick my butt. Doctor, up in the front, we start talking about irritable, restless, and discontent. Yeah, okay. But I'm saying you don't have to be irritable, restless, and discontent to relapse. Sometimes it's like Fred at the end of a perfect day, not a cloud on the horizon, and the obsession comes back. So stop. If you're teaching it, don't teach it in a cycle where you have to get irritable before you relapse, because you can relapse when things are really good. It's just my thought. But guys, if you don't do the work, what's going to happen is the internal condition starts to come back and starts to kick our butt. And the unmanageability that Bill Wilson's talking about in the big book. That first step, y'all follow, and they talk about unmanageability. It's not talking about my external world. What Bill Wilson's talking about in that first step is unmanageability internal. Just for grins, I could do this for an hour, but just for grins. How many of y'all drank when you had lots of money? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. How many of you drank when you had no money? When you had a really nice girlfriend? Satan's sister. Yeah, we could do this all day. Y'all follow? Merle Haggard, listen, yeah, rock and roll. Daylight. Nighttime. Good job. Crap job. Nope. I did this in Europe one time. We did it for about 40 minutes, and it was just fun. It was hilarious. As everybody, guys, I don't need a reason to drink. I do it because internally, that's why Bill Wilson says we drink for the effect produced by the chemical. The effect is a sense of ease and comfort. You ask any of us in here, we all drank a little bit different. Some of us, I got to tell you, it's all for the same reason. I get comfortable in my skin when I drink. If I could drink the way I could drink when I was a kid and it could hit that target every time and get happy, I'd still be drinking. The problem is, I quoted it earlier, you get to a place where it won't work anymore. You get to a place where you can't get to that comfortable spot. Now you're just drinking to stay alive. It's a terrible, terrible way to die. Bill Wilson talks about unmanageability, guys. If y'all look in your little book, thank God for little books. Look on page 52 real quick. Sorry. We had to ask ourselves why we shouldn't apply to our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view. Let me ask you these questions real quick, guys. We were having trouble in personal relationships. Guys, when you're not drinking, ask yourself this question. Were you having trouble in personal relationships? Including the one with yourself, folks. I'm going to say this. A lot of you guys are a little social. Yeah, if I treated any one of y'all in here the way you treat yourself, they'd arrest my little butt. Because I got to tell you, a bunch of us in this gathering are our own worst enemies. And Bill Wilson got it pegged right here. We couldn't control our emotional natures. How many of y'all can relate? 2 weeks after I lay the booze down, I'm driving around the roads and flipping people off and mad at the world. And yeah. Snapping at my wife. Yeah. We were prey to misery and depression. Number one symptom of untreated alcoholism is depression, folks. 90% of the people out there in recovery are so many of them are on antidepressants. Most of them don't need those. A lot of them don't. Because the problem is untreated alcoholism. My experience is I got to work the steps and I was able to move on. Not everybody, but I didn't have clinical depression. I had untreated alcoholism. We had the feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. But it doesn't have to describe you. I mean, some of y'all maybe you've never tried to quit drinking before. Maybe you don't know. But I'm going to tell you, folks, that's me. 2 weeks, 3 weeks out, buddy, I'm a wreck. I started out okay. Everybody's patting me on the back. You're doing so good. Why is it that people can't stay sober? They get so uncomfortable in their skin, they can't stand it. The hardest thing to get family members to understand, almost impossible to get our own fellowship to understand it. My problem is not alcohol. My problem is alcoholism. You take alcohol away from an alcoholic, he's going to get worse, not better. I got nearly 500 people in here, and I guarantee you most of you don't believe that. But if you'll look at your truth based on your experience, if you look at the guys you're sponsoring, you get them detox, you get them away, they're going to a bunch of meetings, and then they gradually come undone. All those bedevilments that Bill Wilson's talking about on page 52 start coming back. It's the spiritual malady, that spiritual disconnectedness. That's why Bill Wilson understood we have to do some things to get reconnected to that power. If I can't get to a place where I can be happy and sober, I won't stay sober. There's a guy here in town he's always talking about, nobody said anything about being happy in AA. You didn't read the same book I did. My book says we absolutely insist on happy, joyous, and free. It just talks about it over and over. Not drinking one day at a time if that's all you're doing, it's tough. Walking on eggshells the rest of your life around triggers. Nothing in here talks about that. Nothing. Just drives me crazy. Trigger's a horse. He's dead. Got nothing to do with this. Yeah. One of the things real quick I got to mention, my old sponsor, Mark Houston, was my sponsor for like 17 years. Wonderful guy. And we lost him too early, I got to tell you. But when I first met him, he just got out of he sober for a long time. He got sober in Colorado with Don and came to Texas. And he ended up 9 years dry in a nut hut in Houston, insane asylum. He didn't drink, but he was miserable, nuts. And got back out, started working the steps up to his butt and just, re-engaged in the fellowship. And he never looked back. I don't know how many thousands of people he helped over the years of his sobriety. Wonderful guy. I've seen that a billion times, folks. One of the things, and this is not in the big book, but Bill Wilson in some of his other stuff talked about, I just got to mention, this cross addiction thing is about as real as can be. Most of the little alcoholics out there that we watch and they get sober, if they leave and they're not doing this stuff, I got this, I'm going to stay sober because I love my kids. And yeah. And then they get out there and get miserable and they know they can't drink because they promised everybody, or maybe Child Protective Services has been called. They're going to lose their kids if they drink again. So they go find prescription medication. I cannot tell you how many people out there we're losing. Alcoholics losing through prescription medications. They're going to rationalize and justify and put something in their system that changes the way they feel. That cross addiction stuff. How many people have I sponsored over the years that ended up in Sex Addicts Anonymous? Never had a problem out there drinking. Now all of a sudden they're sober a few years, not doing the deal, and they end up going on to some other addictions, food addiction, shopping, gambling. Boy, there's going to be some stuff, Super Bowl Sunday. Y'all, there's going to be some busted up people in trouble around the gambling. They never had a problem before because alcohol was fixing the problem. And now they don't have alcohol. They're going to looking for something else. Guys, the only thing that I know that fixes it is the spiritual experience. And the people that don't understand, and how do you know what you don't know? If you've never tried it, you're gonna want to argue this. I would never do that. Yeah. Top of page 44 is where it sums up the questions around the first step, guys. And if you're working with a little newcomer, again, this is taking us 40 minutes to cover this. You can cherry pick it. It may take you a little longer. But the question on the top of We Agnostics, that's why I use this little index, because it's confusing. They don't divide the index up step by the step. So it gets a little confusing. The actual summation of the questions around first step are in the We Agnostics chapter in the first paragraph. So, if you don't know where you're looking, you could get a little lost in there. In the preceding chapters, you've learned something about alcoholism. We hope we've made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. Bill Wilson continues to use the two words control and choice. That's what they're looking for. Again, I don't know if y'all can see this little guy right here. Then I'm gonna move you back over here. This little guy, this is Issue Man. I've talked with him for years. This is the little guy. There's an Issue Woman too. Oh my God. Yeah, she's a lot better looking than Issue Man. But y'all see all the little X's on the outside? Y'all are free to use this anytime. But the little X's on the outside, again, are what everybody wants to point a finger at, is why we're drinking. There's not a family member out there that is not trying to connect those dots. And I'm just saying, guys, this little dark spot inside, that's where alcoholism is. That's what, guys, inside job. You have to treat this. You get well and everything on the outside is going to change. I guarantee you. And we'll talk more about that tomorrow in the second and third step stuff, guys. But there's so many folks out there that continue to want to paint a picture that this is a behavioral deal. And it's not. We're not a bunch of misbehaving poops. And I want to say this before I let you go too. Any picture that paints us as a bunch of misfits needs to be changed. I know that there's some really crazy people in Alcoholics Anonymous. There's some really crazy people at the Elks Lodge tonight, too. There's crazy people all over the world. I don't think we have any more in AA than we do any place else. You're free to disagree, folks, but it frustrates me sometimes when everybody wants to paint a picture that we're all goofy. We're just not. The thing that separates us, I'll say this, there's a great little book out there and it talked about it. We're not different than other people. We're different than other drinkers. Did you get it? Great line. Great line. Because it's the truth, folks. When we get down to brass tacks, guys, if you'll start looking at these symptoms, sometimes you can see them real glaringly. But the question is, you got to ask when the little newcomer, you're qualifying somebody, buddy, did you ever drink more than you intended? Let me ask you a different way. Did you ever get sick drinking? Puke your little toenail? Yeah, I did. Did you ever do it more than once? Yeah. You're almost there. You're almost a charter member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Okay? Normal people don't do that. I watched my little sister get sick one time, guys. One time. She says, I'm never going to do that again. And guys, I'm going to tell you, till this day, we'll go out and she'll have a glass of wine or something. She's, Lisa, you want another drink? She said, no, thank you. I'm starting to feel it. You know, she just, back in the day, the Christmas time, my twin brother and I have been trying to get my two sisters drunk for 33 years. It ain't happening. They don't like it. It doesn't affect them the same way. Given sufficient reason, ill health, falling in love, changing the environment, given sufficient reason, can you stop and stay stopped? What does your experience show you? Yeah. I couldn't. My deal wasn't my family. My deal was if it ever starts to affect my career, I'll stop. And it started affecting my career, and I didn't stop. I can stop for short periods of time, and then my head will tell me it's okay, and I'll take off again. I'll put something in my system that'll trigger that craving, and I'll be off to the races. And guys, I got to tell you and let you go. Those old timers set me down and explained this to me, and I went home that night. Cried. It was scary because I knew for the first time that I was a real alcoholic. I had a fatal illness, but I knew my marching orders now. I knew that I had a 100% guaranteed solution. They told me you can recover from alcoholism. I knew what I needed to do to get well. And it happened really, really fast for me, folks. And some of the stuff we're going to talk about tomorrow. So I sure appreciate y'all letting me share. Thank y'all.
Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you so much. Up next, please allow me to present Billy N. on Tradition 1 for the next 40 minutes.
Thank you for unmuting. I'm Billy. I'm an alcoholic. Good to be back here. Thanks, Chris. So a couple things I want to say before I go diving into Tradition 1. Again, for people who may be new or have no experience with the traditions, I just want to talk about some literature. Because sometimes, and I have a 12 and 12 in front of me, this book, and I'm going to refer to it a little bit, but there's so much other great literature that talks about our traditions. So I have an Alcoholics Anonymous Comes of Age in front of me. I'm going to refer to that in a little bit. I do not have a Language of the Heart where I'm sitting, but Language of the Heart is a book published by the Grapevine and has all Bill's greatest writings in there. That's a super important book. It even has the first, what we call the original 12 tradition essays, one by one, in there. I have a big book in front of me. You can go to workshops that are titled, and the subject is The Traditions Inside the Big Book. The Big Book was published in April of 1939. The traditions didn't appear till 1946. So 17 years ahead of that, there are things in the first section of the Big Book that are all about our traditions. And I just want to point out some flyers for those of you, pamphlets. Seems like we live in a world of flyers during Zoom. The Traditions Illustrated is a great, great little pamphlet. This is the front of it. I could argue on any given day it's better than the 12 and 12. While we call it the illustrated, some of the narrative in there is some of the best writing about our traditions. Problems other than alcohol, which I'll be going to this bad boy tomorrow for sure. Both the long one and the abridged one, the small blue one. But those are important tradition pamphlets. And perhaps my favorite, which is the AA group. The AA group, if it was up to me, would be a free one, would be put into every big book that's sold. There's such imperative information in there about being an AA member and belonging to an AA group and how the groups operate. So with that, I just want to go to the 12 and 12 for a second, if any of you have it in front of you, but you don't have to. But I want to go to the first line, and I will read the long form of Tradition 1. Each member of Alcoholics Anonymous is but a small part of a great whole. AA must continue to live, or most of us will surely die. Hence our common welfare comes first, but individual welfare follows close afterwards. And then if you go to the first page of Tradition 1, which in the 12 and 12 I have in front of me is page 129. It might be off for a couple depending on the version you have. But it says in the first line, the unity of Alcoholics Anonymous is the most cherished quality our society has. And if you look up cherished in the dictionary, it'll say to protect and care. That's what that line is saying. Protecting and caring Alcoholics Anonymous. And then one of my favorite lines is the second paragraph. Does this mean some will anxiously ask that in AA the individual doesn't count for much? Is he to be dominated by his group and swallowed up in it? We may certainly answer this question with a loud no. We believe there isn't a fellowship on earth which lavishes more devoted care upon its individual members. Surely there is none which more jealously guards the individual's right to think, talk, and act as he wishes. In other words, we're not a cult. Chris talked about it. We are not a cult. We give great individual freedom and liberty to every member. We do not tell you how long your hair should be. We don't tell you how you should dress. We don't tell you basically anything. If you're willing to live by the spiritual principles, you get to be an individual. Now, on the next page, on 130, there's a line that says, the AA member has to conform to principles of recovery. His life actually depends upon obedience to spiritual principles. What does comply mean in the dictionary? Not in Billy's head. I like to make up my own definitions. Big problem my entire life. The 12 and 12 is like the service manual, like the big book. It's important sometimes to use the dictionary definitions. Conform means to comply with rules or laws. Now in AA, we don't have rules or laws. We have traditions and steps and concepts. So that's what conform means, to embrace those 36 spiritual principles. Now, in the last paragraph on that page, it says, so at the outset, how best to live and work together as groups became the prime question. I often say, and now I can actually do it because I have them in front of me. If I have a big book to my left and a 12 and 12 to my right, we could go to a page in the big book, depending upon the edition in printing you have, and there would be an asterisk and a footnote that would tell you how many people are in AA today in the United States and Canada. Let's just say 2 million, round number. That way we don't have to argue about what edition each of us is working out of. That's great news. We have 2 million people in Alcoholics Anonymous. But then I could open up the 12 and 12. And I could take you to a page that says this. Since defective relations with other human beings have nearly always been the immediate cause of our woes, including our alcoholism, no field of investigation could yield more satisfying and valuable rewards than this one. So what about if those two are in the same book? We got 2 million people who don't get along with other people. That's basically what we have. 2 million of them whose biggest problem is relations with other human beings. It is pretty hard to have a society or an organization and kind of try to keep it together when every member's problem is defective relations with other human beings, which is exactly why we have the traditions. Now, Carrie said earlier, I'm just going to repeat it because I believe it. The steps are our message. We do not have another message. That's our message. The traditions protect our message, and the concepts help us perpetuate our message. That's what service is all about, perpetuating our message. But what are we protecting? What exactly are we protecting? Why is our unity so important? We're like one of the, I'm sure you have this experience. Only in AA can an alcoholic's life be saved by AA. And then once their life is saved, they want to change AA. That only happens in AA. You were dying, almost dead. The 12 steps saved your life. And now you want to change our message. But how important is what we are protecting? So before I go on a little bit, I want to just tell a quick little story. Some of you know it, but there's a lot of people here, and I'm going to guess a lot don't. Because once you get into AA, and once you stay sober a little while, and maybe once you go through the big book, you kind of take AA for granted. Much like we all did, let's just call it March 15th of last year. That March 16th will be the same. AA doors will be open, the bad coffee will be served, the uncomfortable chairs will be there. But we know that changed. But even without COVID, how for granted do we take Alcoholics Anonymous? Because there's very few people left around who were still alive when there was no AA. For the vast majority of the world's population and the population of Alcoholics Anonymous, we've only known a world with AA. Even when I didn't like AA, I knew about it. Even when I hated AA, I knew about it. But we take it for granted. And sometimes we just don't realize what we're protecting. So I just want to share this little story with you if you don't know it. That in 1998, Time magazine decided it was going to publish a new book because the year 2000 was coming. And while the rest of the world was worried about this thing called Y2K and all the computers would crash, Time Magazine wanted to publish this new book. And to publish this new book, they gathered together a committee. And that committee was made up of the 20 of the most prominent historians alive in the world. And when they got that committee together, they gave them one assignment, just one simple assignment. Start on January the 1st of 1900 and end on today, which at the time was 98, and identify for us the 80 most important days of the 20th century. We need to know what the 80 most important days are. If you go to Google or eBay, whatever, tonight, your spare time this week, you can Google the 80 days that changed the world by Time Magazine. You can probably find a way to get a copy. If you go about 15 pages into that book, you will land on June 10th, 1935. And a picture of Bill and Bob in a coffee pot. And you will read a short story that says, on this day, a broken stockbroker from New York met a broken surgeon from Akron. And from that meeting led to the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous, an organization that has saved millions of alcoholics' lives, and their solution so powerful that they have shared it with other organizations for people who have other problems. If you go a couple of pages before that or after that, you can see what June 10th, 1935 is being compared to. It's being compared to the wall coming down. It's being compared to women being given the right to vote. It's being compared to Jackie Robinson being the first black man to play Major League Baseball. It's being compared to Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Had a Dream speech. So when we think about what we're protecting, that's what we're protecting. That there was a time when AA didn't exist. We forget about that all the time, myself included. I'm not judging anyone else. I'm the first one to be driving home from work, and I want to golf more, and I want to ride my motorcycle more, and I want to go to more Metallica concerts. But the real question is, do I treat Alcoholics Anonymous like its birth was one of the 80 most important days of the 20th century? And do I embrace the traditions in a way that protects and guarantees that AA will always be here? Because it's written all throughout our literature. Our worst enemies are not from outside. We are our own worst enemies. And you have to ask yourself that question. Do I treat AA like it's one of the 80 most important days in the 20th century? I loved what Chris said, because AA is not for habitual drunk drivers. I'm one. I'm a habitual drunk driver. AA is not for young, angry Irish kids who get into a lot of bar fights. I was a young, angry Irish kid who got into a lot of bar fights. It's not what AA is for. AA is for real alcoholics. I'm not a heavy drinker. And I love what Chris said, because, one time I got myself in a little jam at an Asket basket, to always my demise, that someone asked me to say something spur of the moment and I just let it rip. And, I believe in singleness of purpose, and you'll hear my views on the fifth tradition. But that day, what came out of the Ask It basket was, do you think drug addicts are going to destroy Alcoholics Anonymous? And my answer that day is the same as it is today. No, but heavy drinkers might. Heavy drinkers have a better shot of doing it. Because the most dangerous thing in Alcoholics Anonymous that exists is a real alcoholic sponsored by somebody that's not a real alcoholic. A real alcoholic sponsored by a heavy drinker. So when we talk about what we're protecting the very thing that gives us life today. Now, inside the traditions, and it's referred to inside the pamphlet of Traditions Illustrated, sometimes you could say there really is only one tradition. That our only tradition is unity. The other 11 are a way to keep and preserve it. That's what traditions 2 to 12 are. They are simply 11 ways to protect and keep our unity, which at the end of the day is most important. A lot of unity has to do with respect and sacrifice. And probably sacrifice will be a common theme as I go through all 12 traditions. Because to those much is given, much is expected. That's what I've been taught and believe, and now I embrace that. And when you're given a new life, how do you really put into words what's expected? It's not that your life was a little crappy and you came to AA. It's not that you had a couple of bumps in the road and you came to AA. It's not that work is all over you and you came to AA. Fact of the matter is that you're a real alcoholic. You suffer from alcoholism. And the question is, how important is it for us? There was an old motel commercial. That tagline was, leave the light on. That's what AA Unity is all about. Our number one job is to leave the light on. That I have a sacred agreement with my personal higher power that the AA that greeted me is here for the person that comes in tomorrow. That I have to do my job making sure AA is left alone and is just as powerful, so that for the next alcoholic who's dying, who comes in the door, AA is here for them. When we talk about perpetuating our message, sometimes people, I love when Chris talked about the outside organizations he talks to, and I've talked to some of those organizations too, and even in my regular professional life, people that know I'm an AA or whatever, they confuse AA. They think like we're a social services agency or we're some kind of religious organization or we're some kind of do-gooder squad. But we actually have a very selfish reason for keeping our unity and perpetuating our message. It's that our life depends on it. We could argue Do you need meetings? Do you not? Who cares? Because there's something in the big book we can't argue with. The line that says, this works when everything else doesn't. We're not a do-gooder organization. We're not a social services organization. We need new people because our lives depend on it. I'm sure there's plenty of people that could go years with contented recovery without going to a meeting. That's not my business. But what would they do if they were in one of those situations where everything else did fail? They need that one thing the book talks about that never fails. Strenuous work with another alcoholic. That's why our unity is so, so important. And that's why sacrifice is weaved throughout all the traditions. I could go one by one regarding unity and sacrifice. There's no group of people in the world more than alcoholics who love other people's money more than we do. I mean, let's face it. But for us as an organization, for our unity, we have to sacrifice that. Because it's not good for us. We could look at Tradition 6 and build hospitals and build whatever. It's not good for our unity. We have to sacrifice our ego. The enemy of the traditions is no different than the enemy written in the big book. The alcoholic ego. The alcoholic ego is our number one enemy. It's the one that tells people, one of the things I tell people is you can't pick and choose which tradition you're going to embrace. It's all 12 or none. I mean, it's not a cafeteria. I always love comparing the traditions to the big book. I'm sure some of you, Chris talked about crazy things we hear in meetings. Oh, welcome to AA. It's like a cafeteria. Just take what you want and don't take what you don't want. That's not how AA works. You don't get to do that with the big book and the 12 steps and the message of recovery. You don't get to decide what you want. We only have one way. Same goes with the traditions. You don't get to pick, well, I like 1, 3, 5, and 6, but I'm not too happy with 8 and 12. It's just not like that. Throughout all 12 traditions are weaved this kind of underlying fabric of sacrifice. That sacrifice is required for AA membership. Now, when we talk about Tradition 1, what's the greatest thing about AA? You can't get kicked out. I'm still trying to find another not other 12-step organizations, but just another organization that you cannot be kicked out of. It just doesn't exist. We're the only ones. But people confuse that with getting kicked out of a group or a meeting. You see, your behavior can be so bad that you can stand out in the parking lot with your AA membership card and your privileges still good, but not allowed in that meeting. And that's simply because the group is more important than the individual. You see, your right to misbehave or act unsafe towards other people or whatever else you might be doing. Maybe you're not following the rules of the landlord. A meeting I went to in New York City a long time ago was held in a basement of a church that was a preschool. And, it's a city. things get stolen. So some of the members, they brought their bicycles downstairs into the church basement. And the church let us know, no bicycles in the basement. See, AA doesn't have rules, but our landlords, they usually have a lot of rules. And of course, wouldn't you know, one person decided that the rule doesn't apply to them, which I am very familiar with. My whole life is filled with that. No swimming after dark, except for Billy, right? That's every sign or notice I've ever seen has an invisible asterisk that only I can see. No parking here, except for Billy. No right on red, except for Billy. Every single rule I run into, I have my own exception for, that I'm convinced makes perfect sense. But this member was convinced that, he was bringing his bike. And the group had to tell him to leave. Now, they didn't take away his AA membership card. They just simply told him, we can't jeopardize our relationship with our landlord. There's 45 people who come here for a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And more importantly, there's 1 or 2 people every week who might be coming to their first, second, or third meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And their life depends upon meeting one of us. And if you're going to interfere with us carrying the message, well, then you can't be a member of our group. It's a very hard thing, I think, sometimes for people to get their hands around. That, yes, we give you a lot of individual freedom, but Alcoholics Anonymous and your AA group come first. And that's why, I don't say a lot of things that I used to say. I don't put down other meetings. I let them be as they are. Other groups. The unity of AA is more important. And plus, an important lesson I learned with the traditions, there's really only 2 kinds of AA business. My business and none of my business. I can really boil everything down to that. But that's why the unity of my group is so important. And I'm going to get to it in the later traditions. My group is where I have the biggest say for AA unity. It's where I give most of my financial support to my home group. It's also where I vote, because I only vote in one place. But those all come back to tradition 1 because my group is more important than me. And I think for those of us, I'll go back to things often quoted that are not in the big book. It's a selfish program. We could put that right up in the top 10. Meanwhile, the book that Chris is talking about tells us that selfishness is one of my biggest problems. When it comes to unity, that's the opposite of being selfish. Selfish is when I put myself first. Selfish was when the whole world has to revolve around me. Unity is when I'm able to take some tools and take a step back and say, you know what? AA is more important than me. You know what? My group, it's more important than me. So you're going to see me weave as we talk about the later traditions. Unity and sacrifice is part of all of them. And so very important. There's so many other organizations that existed. The Oxford Group, the Washingtonians, the Women's Christian Temperance Union, the WCTU, so many organizations. But AA's not been here that long compared to how old the world is. It's basically brand new compared to how long the world is, how old the world is. Now, I don't care whether you believe, I don't care what your religion is. I don't care what your view of the Bible is. All I know is that the Bible was written a long time ago. What it says in there is none of my business from an AA point of view. However, it's very interesting that a book written that long ago documents people with my problem, documents people with bloodshot eyes, documents people who drink too much from the grapes, from the vines. AA is brand new compared to the history of the world. You know, basically there's 2 or 3 generations in front of us in AA. My dad was born a year before AA was started. My grandfather died alcoholically a couple of years after AA started. So when we think about our unity and what we're protecting something for all the people who are just like us, who are real alcoholic, and where nothing else works for people like me. So that's it. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow. New Horizons Group, thank you very much for having us here tonight. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Billy. This concludes our first evening of the weekend. We'll be meeting back here at 9 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow morning to start getting the steps and traditions. Another huge thank you to both Chris and Billy. Just a reminder, we do have an Ask It basket this weekend to submit any and all questions you have for either speaker about the steps and traditions. Just send your question in the chat to co-host Jerry, or text your question to 541-788-7276. At the end of this workshop, the speakers will be answering the questions submitted throughout the weekend. And to close us out for the evening one last time, I give you Michael P.
Hi, my name is Michael, and I am a recovered alcoholic. To close this meeting this evening, please join me in a moment of silence, followed by the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Guys, just so everybody can, I'm not going to do the whole receiving line thing, but so everybody can say quick thank you to the guys. I don't want to hold them hostage all night, but go for it.
Thanks, Billy.
Thank
you, Billy.
Billy, thanks.
Thank you so much.
Guys,
Thank you.
amazing. This was absolutely amazing.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Amazing tonight.
Thanks, Billy. Love you, Chris.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you so much for everybody.
Thank you.
Woo! David says hi from New Jersey, too.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Joel.
Tomorrow.
Thank you, Chris and Billy.
Thank you, Billy. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank
Have a
you,
good
Dee
night,
Dee.
all.
Thank you.
Thank you guys in the
Thank you,
morning.
Amber.
Thanks. Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Rose.